Welcome back to the channel, folks, for another episode in Field Botany, where today, the 14th of July, in this Season 2 2026 of a very hot summer, we look at another plant known as Wild Angelica or Angelica sylvestris. And this is a plant in the family Apiaceae or the carrot family, and was formerly known as the Umbelliferea. Wild Angelica is what is termed a compound umbel. That is to say, it consists of an inflorescence which has a secondary umbel or umbellet. The inflorescence of this primary umbel contains a subdivision of secondary umbels or umbellets, resembling snowball-like clusters. It is within the secondary umbel or umbellet that we see the finer detail of the small individual flowers. In this slide, at the rear of the secondary umbel, we can see the arrangement of rays, which are known as pedicels and peduncles, and also the positioning of the bracteoles beneath the small flower heads. For your convenience, we have included the following 3 slides, which may be stopped at any point, illustrating the descriptive terminology and anatomy of a typical umbel, which can be seen from the slides to follow. Here in the secondary umbellet, we can see the red pedicels supported on a single peduncle. Likewise, in this shot, we can see the 6 to 10 bracteoles at the base of the secondary flower head. Here in this shot, at the rear of the domed primary umbel, we can see that the primary umbel does not have bracts, a distinguishing feature. Here in this ball-like structure, we see an emerging flower head and directly beneath it a bract. Where the flower head, or in this case the primary umbel, divide off the main stem, they are notable by a conspicuous inflated bract. The leaves of Angelica contain 3 to 4 paired leaflets ending in a terminal trifoliate arrangement of 3 sharply separated leaves, as distinct from garden Angelica, where the leaves may be lobed at the terminal. The upper surface or adaxial surface of the leaf is dark green and contains finely teethed margins. The lower or abaxial surface is light green with distinct venation. Turning our attention to the fruit and seeds, the fruits of Angelica are about 5 mm long and contain 4 distinct wings or flanges with a row of 3 grooves running down the centre, and the fruit is important in distinguishing it from other umbellifers. Okay folks, welcome back to the channel for another episode of Field Botany, where today on the 14th of July, amidst Season 2 in the second heatwave that the UK is experiencing, we come here on a dull, cool, overcast day, possibly meaning that the heatwave has come to an end. The plant that we are looking at today is known as Wild Angelica or Angelica sylvestris. And this is a plant in the family Apiaceae or the carrot family, and it is an umbel or the umbel family. And if you haven't seen our 5-minute family video, I urge you to look at that, where we describe the anatomy and identification characteristics that we see in the family, many of which we see in this plant today. The plant stands between 1 and 2 meters and can be seen in the summer months of June to October. The overall strategy of the plant is to provide dinner plates of nectar to insects with long and short tongues, and then to set seeds or multiple seeds in the many umbels across the plant so that it may disperse, the plant being annual or short-lived perennial. So that's its strategy in terms of propagation and dispersal. The overall form of the plant is it has a primary umbel, each with individual secondary umbels or umbellets, and we'll be looking at that in more detail. Each little flower is creamy white, turning to pinkish red towards the end of the season. So that's the overall presentation of the domed umbel. Habitat. This plant is found on damp, wet soils, so it's found in damp or wet meadows, damp or wet woodland, aquatic margins, which would include riverbanks, streams or ditches, and we are lucky enough here today to find it on the aquatic margins of an urban pond. So that's the habitat that we find the plant in. Uses. What of its uses? Well, the plant is widely used. For example, it's crystallized in sugar and used to flavour and decorate cakes and confectionery. But more critical, it's also used to make alcoholic spirits and botanical liquors, notably in flavouring gin and in two particular botanical liquors known as chartreuse and benedictine. And chartreuse is a botanical liquor which has been made from 1750 by the Carthusian monks in France, and it comes as no surprise that benedictine was made by the Benedictine order, who also make a fine tonic wine in the abbeys at Buckfast. So that's just a little bit of background to it. That obviously reflects the knowledge and skills which many of the monastic orders had in the medieval period, and we touched on that on our video on the doctrine of signatures, and if you haven't seen that episode, have a little look. So that's the background of the plant. Without further delay or ado, let's take a look at the plant in more detail. Here we see the candied stems of Angelica used in confection. Here we see the two colour flavours of chartreuse, a botanical liquor known to contain Angelica. Likewise, the botanical liquor of benedictine, which contains Angelica and 27 other known herbs, and is made in the abbey at Fécamp in France. Each bottle has the monastic seal and the abbreviation DOM, Deo Optima Maximo, meaning to God, most good, most great. The habitat includes damp meadows, ditches, woods, aquatic margins, including riverbanks and pond edges, and it can grow on a variety of soils. Okay folks, I'm going to attempt to do a brief description of this plant off the top of my head, from tip to head. The plant begins its journey from the soil as a large substantive taproot which sustains the plant through its early phases of growth. The overall form of the plant, it is a hairless plant. And as the stem emerges from the ground, we can see that the stem is effectively hollow, it is ridged, and will turn purple-red towards the end of the season. So this is our stem, as we can see. Coming off the stem, we have the leaves. And the leaves of Wild Angelica, Angelica sylvestris, are 3 times pinnated and have terminal leaflets in threes. And one of the main distinctions between Wild Angelica sylvestricus and Garden Angelica, which is Angelica arch Angelica, is that the 3 terminal leaflets in Wild Angelica are separate leaves. As you can see, there are 3 distinct pinnate leaves. I don't know if the camera will pick that out, but those are 3 distinct leaves. In Garden Angelica, those leaves are merged to form lobes. And another subtle distinction between distinguishing the Garden Angelica, which is a non-native plant, as compared to this native plant, is that the flower clusters are much more tightly packed together in Garden Angelica. Just a few subtle differences, which we'll cover further in the video. The leaves themselves, if we look at them, are crenated with fine margins or teeth, And on the front surface, or adaxial surface, they are dark green, and on the rear or abaxial surface they are lighter grey-green. So that is the leaves of Wild Angelica. As we move up the stem, we can see that the plant branches into a series of primary umbels here, here and here. This one flowering in full flower, these coming into flower. So where the flower heads branch, we can see here, I don't know if the camera will pick that out, we have what is termed an inflated bract, and a subtle distinction between garden Angelica and Wild Angelica is the bracts, the inflated bracts, are much bigger in garden Angelica and slightly less in size in the Wild Angelica. Just a few subtle differences to compare and contrast. So as we move up to the umbel, this is what is called a primary umbel, and this is a great plant to illustrate the anatomy of an umbel. This is a primary umbel, and it's composed of a number of secondary umbels or umbellets. And when we look at the Umbelliferas, the sort of key characteristics, which hopefully, if you have watched the 5-minute family video where we covered this anatomy, one of the features that you'll be looking for in terms of dichotic keys is whether there is a bract at the base of the primary umbel or whether there are bracts at the base of the secondary umbel. And I don't know if the camera will pick that out, but there are between 6 and 10 bracteoles on this secondary umbellet. And those combinations are often key factors in distinguishing the umbel, together with the fruit, which we'll return to in a minute. And we are also going to look at the umbel structure in close-up in a wee moment. So what's actually in the flower? Well, the flower itself consists of 5 upright stamens, rather like lampposts, and 1 pistil, which is fused or merged from 2 carpels, giving rise to the ovules, which in turn towards the end of the season set seed. And that fruit and seed is very important in terms of further dichotic characteristics, which will help us increase the confidence of our identification. And we'll return to the fruit of Wild Angelica in a moment. So that's the overall form of this nectar producing flower, these tiny flowers being in the secondary umbels. And as we pointed out in the introduction, the overall strategy of this umbel, which is an annual or short-lived perennial, is effectively to produce large numbers of dinner plates, because within these flowers they have a thing called the Stylopodium, which produces nectar, which is the yellow structure at the centre of the flowers. And the Stylopodia are fairly accessible to both long and short-tongued insects. So this umbel, or secondary umbels, present effectively a dinner plate or cafe to the many passing insects such as bumblebees and insects with shorter tongues. So that is the flower structure. As we mentioned, later in the season we'll return and look at the fruit. And the fruit is often quite diagnostic in distinguishing between the different umbellers, particularly here on the aquatic margin, where we may come across a plant known as water dropwort. And the fruits of Wild Angelica tend to be flattened, have 4 ridged flanges, and have 3 grooves down the centre, which in terms of sculpture and structure makes them fairly unique as compared to, for example, the dropworts, which are a much more globular fruit with ridges and 2 horn structures derived from the stigma remnants. So looking at the fruit in close detail, is often a key diagnostic in terms of dichotic keying, improving the confidence of your identification. So that is an overview to the structure of the Umbellifer and the flower from head to toe. So we're going to take a look at the secondary umbel. Okay folks, so we're looking at the surface of the primary umbel, and we've described the minute flowers in each secondary umbel or umbellet. In this close-up overview, we want to take a look at the secondary umbellet or the secondary umbel. And I don't know if this is going to be clear on the camera, but from the underneath of this individual secondary umbel, we can see a number of things. The first thing we can see that it contains between 6 and 10 bracteoles beneath the flowers, which we've described earlier on. So those are the 6 to 10 bracteoles. And then we have the ray of the secondary umbel just here, and that in its own right is also ridged like the stem and the rest of the plant. So this is what you call a secondary umbel or umbellet, and this overall umbel is a primary umbel, and that's the overall structure of the plant. And as I pointed out, in each flower or each secondary umbellet, we have individual flowers of 5 stamens, 1 pistil, which is fused to form 2 carpels, which in turn forms ovules, which in turn at the end of the season forms the distinctive fruit and seed. So that is a little bit of a closer look into the umbel structure itself. And the overall strategy of the Umbellifer, which I've pointed out, is a short-lived perennial or annual, is basically to offer as much incentive in terms of nectar from the Stylopodium, which is the little yellow discs which is in each individual flower, making it accessible for long and short-tongued insects, so it becomes pollinated. And then across the umbels, the primary umbels, which they can be 3 to 5 to 6 on any given plant, to set numerous seeds which will propagate itself and disperse and hence continue in the form of an annual. So that's the overall logic of this parasol-like Umbellifer. It makes it visible to insects from a large distance. It's effectively saying, come visit me, I'm a cafe. And when those visitors arrive, they pollinate the plant and cause it to form multiple seeds later in the season, which will then disperse and form annuals. So that's a little brief insight into the umbel and the secondary umbel and the umbellets. And here we can see the bracteoles in the secondary umbel. Notably, which we haven't shown you, is at the base of the umbel here. This is the primary umbel now we're looking at here. This is the base of the umbel. I'll just move it to various focuses. There is no bracts, and the fact that we have bracteoles here and no bracteoles there makes it a distinctive set of keying characteristics, because some umbels will have bracts on the primary umbel. Some umbels will have bracts on the primary umbel and vice versa. So these are useful keying characteristics. Just a few loose lights to reinforce the anatomy of the plant that we looked at. In the next slide we see the Stylopodium, which presents as yellow central discs, which are dinner plates for a whole host and variety of insect pollinators, as can be seen from this slide. If you are keying a variety of umbels from a number of keys, it pays to take the time to understand the basic terminology After all, do you know the difference between a pedicule and a pedicel, and a bracteole and a bract, and where each of these structures are found on the plant? Wild Angelica is a plant of between 1 and 2 metres in stature. It can be seen between July and October and is a plant of damp, wet soils, woodland or meadows or aquatic margins such as riverbanks, hedges and pond margins. It is a plant in the family Apiaceae or the carrot family, formerly known as the Umbelliferea family. Wild Angelica features a rounded, domed umbel of small white or pale pink reddish flowers which are typically tinged with purple. It is a compound umbel composed of primary and secondary umbels. It produces copious nectar from a structure known as a Stylopodium, which attracts general pollinators such as midges, gnats, flower beetles, moths and bees. The Stylopodium is the yellow disc-like structure situated at the centre of each floret, which is responsible for secreting copious amounts of nectar for the large variety of pollinators which visit it. The florets are located on the secondary umbel or umbellet, and they typically contain 5 stamens and a pistil formed from 2 fused carpels, which give rise to the ovules, which in turn will then form fruit or seed. The ovary of Wild Angelica is classed as superior, meaning it is attached above other floral parts. As stated, this plant can be seen between the months of July and October. The fruits of Angelica are important in differentiating other umbels. They are rounded, flattened, and consist of 4 wings or flanges with 3 grooves running down the centre, making them, in terms of sculpture and anatomy, very distinct. We turn our attention now to the confusion species, and during the episode we have compared and contrasted Wild Angelica, Angelica sylvestris, with Garden Angelica, a non-native species, Angelica arch Angelica. The following slide compares Wild and Garden Angelica and often involves subtle factors such as the density of flower head, the extent of inflation of the bracts joining the stem, and the terminal leaflets on the leaves, which in the case of Garden Angelica are lobed as opposed to discrete leaves. In our second confusion species, which shares the same habitat and phenology, we are comparing Hemlock Water Dropwort or Oenanth crocata with Angelica, and it is absolutely essential that we are able to distinguish the 2 plants. This is not just a matter of taxonomy, but could be a matter of life and death, given it contains a highly toxic poison. Let us allow the plant to speak for itself. Well folks, that's all from me on this plant, Wild Angelica. Once again, thank you very much indeed for watching. If you have liked or enjoyed this video or found it interesting or educational, please like, share and subscribe to help us bring another in the series. In the meantime, all that remains to be said in the words of Maggie, our international symbol of floral appreciation, is whatever the weather is, get outdoors in the summer and enjoy the sunshine.